Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about how to beat Traptrix. We're going to go over the entire deck. We're really going to break it down. We're going to talk about all of the effects to make sure you guys don't get intentionally or unintentionally cheated. And I'm just going to explain everything to you, give you a couple ideas as to what cards are good against them and which ones are maybe not as great because of certain effects that the deck has. So we're going to go over all of this, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding and idea about how to go up against Traptrix, because it really is a very strong contender in this meta, I think, and a lot of people are going to be picking it up because it's very budget as well. So with that, before we get started, I would like to encourage you guys to look at my Patreon if you maybe want to. So getting started, first we're going to break down the main deck. We're going to talk about the monsters first. Basically, a lot of these monsters, I have them pulled up over here, so I'm going to be looking down to explain everything. A lot of these monsters are not hard ones per turn. The new ones are, you have Pudica and you have the Arachnokampa, which both of them are hard ones per turns, and also the Dionea effect, where it sets a whole normal trap card from your graveyard. It's also a hard ones per turn. And it's important to remember, we're gonna get into it immediately. So Dionea says that it sets a whole normal trap card and it needs to be banished during the end phase of your next turn if it's still on the field. So you need to make sure people don't cheat you and leave that card if it wasn't used. However, if it gets used together with one of the links we're gonna talk about, the Tularia or Kularia. This one says that after you activate a whole normal trap card, you can set it instead of sending it to the graveyard. And if you set to the one that was set off of Dionea, it will not get banished by the end phase. When we talk about the other effects, so you have the Mirmeleo, for example, which this one, it's important to remember that it has separate effects on normal and special summon, and just make sure that no one cheats you by doing the wrong effect when they normal or special. And then also, it's mandatory to destroy. So even if you have no spell and trap cards, Mirmeleo needs to activate to target the spell trap your opponent controls and destroy it, because it's mandatory, even if you don't have it. And that actually helps them, because if they have Seta face up and you use something like Evenly or something like Impermanence, for example, in a new chain, when it comes to the example of Evenly, if they leave Seta face up, and in the example of Impermanence, of course, Seta is going to be able to activate. Basically, when Seta activates, it can special summon Mirmeleo, and then that one is going to trigger, attempt to destroy something, and Seta can trigger again. So by you activating something like Evenly or Impermanence, you're actually giving your opponent pluses because of the Mirmeleo mandatory effect. So that's kind of annoying, but it is very important. And then moving on to the new support. So this one is actually really, really nice because it protects your set spell and trap cards from being destroyed the first time they would be destroyed. And it's also a quick effect, meaning that it can actually chain to something like Harpy's Feather Duster or Lightning Storm or something like that. But it needs to be special summoned if you control a Traptrix monster. So if your opponent controls a Traptrix monster, then it's fine. However, if they don't, it cannot be summoned. So keep that in mind. And it also locks the opponent from being able to special summon anything else other than insects or plants from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. So it's a protection and a free special, but it does have some downsides when it comes to that. So moving on, we have Pudica, which is also a new card, and it can also only be used on a special summoned monster. So if it's special summoned, you can target a special summoned monster your opponent controls, you banish it, and during the next standby phase, you basically special summon one of the banished monsters you have. So it doesn't need to be the one that they banished with Pudica, and you can also only choose among your banished monsters. So there's that when it comes to this one, and that's pretty much it when it comes to the main deck monsters. The Mantis also we need to talk about. It's a quick effect to target a set spell trap card and bounce it. So this means that it can actually go around like targeting a destruction or something like that. However, if they then set one spell trap from the hand, just keep in mind that they cannot activate it during that turn because it was set that turn. So don't get cheated that way. And moving on to their spells and trap cards. So the Garden actually protects them, the insects and the plants, from being destroyed by battle each turn the first time. So keep that in mind. It's again an annoying effect. They also get an additional normal summon. They get a special summon by banishing a monster they control. So it does a lot, and it's also searchable. So it's a very important card for the deck. And then we're going to talk about Holetea. So This one has a lot of effects and a lot of important things to talk about. So we're going to break the card down, just go slowly. Basically, if you want to use it on the turn that it's set, or if they want to use it on the turn that it's set, they need to discard a normal trap card. It can just be used regularly, however, not on the turn that it's set. If they discard a normal trap card though, then sure. So that's important if they set it off of something like Sada or something. So there's that. And then also, it is not treated as a trap card anymore when it's special summoned. So if you flip it face down, it's not going to go back to the spell and trap card zone or get sent to the graveyard if the spell and trap card zone is if everything is occupied, but it's going to be set in the monster zone because it's not treated as a trap anymore. You can also only use one of its effects per turn and only once that turn. So keep that in mind as well. It's very important to not get cheated that way. Also, if you're using Evenly, for example, and they have Holotea in the graveyard because it was maybe a material under an XYZ or something, just think about it because it is a disruption. If they have Purika in the graveyard as well, they can banish your special summon monster by banishing the Holotea and special summoning the Purika. Oh, I hit my hand in the table. They can pop something if they special summon Mirmelea off of its effect. They can get follow-up if they special summon Dionea and set something. So it's important. It still does something in the graveyard. So keep that in mind. And also, if they use Zeus and Zeus their own Holotea, they can also get it into the graveyard to continue playing with it. It can also just be regularly banished if you use Evenly against them. Sometimes people will get confused, because tokens cannot be banished face down. But this is just a normal monster. It's completely fine to banish the Holotea face down. And also another very important thing is they cannot send it with Rafflesia to copy the effect, because Rafflesia's effect would essentially, the Rafflesia's effect that's copying the Holotea would do nothing because Rafflesia cannot special summon itself as a normal trap card. I'm sure it's quite obvious, but basically you cannot do it. Even if maybe you think that, I'll just send it for cost and then achieve nothing, you cannot do it because you can activate an effect that would essentially do nothing. So you can't use it, even though it would be really cool, but you can't. All right, then moving on to the other whole cards. Basically, also the Holotea, I don't know if I said it already, but it's treated as a whole card. So it can be set off of Sarah, searched off of Mirmeleo, set off of Dionea. It just works in tandem with the entire deck. Then we have the Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare, which can only be used on a special summoned monster on the opponent's field. That's what you can negate. Then moving on to Bottomless. So Bottomless is seeing play in the deck, which is actually insane. The card is really good if you use it well, I think, and if you use it against a lot of monsters, if they summon something simultaneously, like Pendulum, for example. If they summon at least one monster that's less than 1500, they're still going to have to banish all of the ones that are 1500 or more, so keep that in mind as well. And then moving on to the Floodgate Trap Hole, basically the Floodgate flips forever, so keep that in mind, but the monsters can still be chibited over, or they can be fused with or something. And also the Bottomless and the Floodgate can be used on normal summon monsters as well. So there's no restrictions there, as opposed to the Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare or something like that. So there's that. You can expect Solemn Judgment post side. And also the Time Space Trap Hole, I've seen it see play in the deck. It wasn't in the structure deck, that's why I'm specifically mentioning it. And it's basically when your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck or hand, and you shuffle that card back. And also it's not cost to lose life points. It needs to be shuffled back first, then you lose 1000 life points for each returned monster. So if you have less than 1000 life points, you can still activate the card. You're just going to die, basically. Also, it can be used if your opponent used Dark Ruler, because you're not taking damage, you're simply losing life. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, the Gravedigger's Trap Hole can be used if your opponent is under Dark Ruler. So if you use Dark Ruler, you can use Gravedigger's Trap Hole because the primary effect is the negation, and then you just won't inflict 2000 life points damage. All right, and then the next one that we're going to talk about a bit longer is Terrifying Trap Hole Nightmare. So this is a new card, it's a support card, and basically what's important is if your opponent has special summon a monster this turn, you can target one monster your opponent controls with 2000 or more attack, destroy it. Then if you have a whole normal trap in your grave, you can banish one monster from your opponent's graveyard. So I wanted to read it because it's important to know that they don't need to target the monster that you summoned. So if you have special summon this turn, they can still target a monster that's 2000 or more attack that you control, and it wasn't the one that was special summoned this turn, and then they destroy it, and then they banish non-targeting one monster from your graveyard. So basically, because it's all happening at once, if you have something to respond to the Trap Hole Nightmare, you would have to do it immediately. You like chain it and protect your stuff in the graveyard or whatever, because you're not going to have a chance like mid-effect be like, oh, what's your target? What are you banishing? Like, I get that the effect is not simultaneous. It's not what I'm saying, but it's all one effect. So if you don't chain and like protect your stuff or do whatever, you just misplayed. So there's that. And also I read a very, very interesting thing about how you can make Mirror Jade or stuff like that essentially miss the opportunity to activate, like cards that would have to be sent to the graveyard to then trigger. And it's not about like missing the timing per se. It's not that the last thing that happened wasn't what causes it to activate in the next chain, but basically cards like Mirror Jade, they would have to be in their exact location where they trigger after the chain is finished resolving. And afterwards, when you destroy it, then you can choose to banish something. And if you choose to banish the Mirror Jade, it's not in the location where it would have to activate anymore, so it cannot trigger. So that's how you can go around Mirror Jade's effect, which is actually huge because Branded is such an important deck right now. So I think that's very, very cool. When it comes to, I mean, for the Traptrix player, it's a video about beating Traptrix and I'm hyping Traptrix. I'm sorry, but it is important to know. Yeah, moving on. They're playing Parallel Exceed as well. And something to keep in mind is if you take away the zone where Parallel Exceed would have to be summoned to, it doesn't get summoned because it needs to be summoned in the zone that the link monster points to. You can use Ash on it, for example. I think that's not a bad play at all. However, using Impermanence is not as great. Like we talked about before, Seta can trigger in a new chain and then they're going to get infinite pluses pretty much. So just don't Imperm Parallel Exceed, even though it would be level 8, not level 4 anymore, but it's not worth it. You're giving them way too many plays. And finishing off with the main deck, they can also play Evenly in the main. They can also run the Therium package. And moving on to the extra deck. So the Seta is unaffected by trap effects and the other extra deck monsters as well. So the main deck ones are unaffected by whole normal trap cards, and then the extra deck ones, if they have Xyz material or if they were link summoned, are unaffected by trap effects. It's important to keep in mind that it's link summoned and having Xyz materials. So if it wasn't link summoned and if they don't have Xyz materials anymore, they're not unaffected anymore. And it's also not a condition, it's just a continuous effect. So if you manage to negate them, they can be affected again. Also, if you're using something like Evenly, your opponent needs to banish cards. So it goes around the unaffected part because you're not affecting the cards by using Evenly. So yeah, there's that. Seta will always trigger in a new chain. That's important to think about, not during the damage step. And also both effects can be used. So Seta is pretty much busted. And you can also negate the summon of Seta with something like Judgment because it's not on the field yet, so you're just preventing the summon. So moving on to the other monsters, you have Kularia, which needs to summon in defense, so it cannot revive link monsters. And also it's only during your end phase, not during both of them. Then there's, it needs to use 2 insects or plants, so it's not generic. And then the other one, the Atipus, can only use one of them, and then whichever monsters. It's important to think about that it gives 1000 attack boost to your Traptrix monster, all of them, while you have a normal trap in your graveyard, which is going to be, you know, almost 100% of the time. So they're going to be huge. Like this one is 2800 with the boost, so don't attack into them if they have normal trap cards in the graveyard. And also the effect where it basically negates the effects of monsters up to the number of insects or plants you control, and then you apply the following effect. It's all part of like one thing, like we talked about with Terrifying Trap Hole. It happens with one effect. So again, if you want to disrupt it somehow, you need to chain immediately. Then we have Rafflesia. This one again like just has a bunch of effects. Basically it makes your Traptrix monsters unable to be destroyed by battle or card effects or targeted, except Rafflesia. However, Rafflesia is unaffected by trap effects while it has materials. So yeah, it's kind of annoying to go around, and it also has a quick effect where it sends and it can be used together with pretty much every single one of them. The Traptrix, Trap Hole, Nightmare, Bottomless, Floodgate, everything except for the Holotea, like we mentioned before. There's also the Alomeros and the Pinguicula. So with Alomeros, it revives a level 4, so again cannot revive a link. And with both of them that I mentioned, they have second effects where one of them is able to attach a monster as material and the other one special summons it, but it's only when the monster is banished or sent to the graveyard by card effect. In the case of Alomeros, it needs to be by the Traptrix player's effect. So that's a bit niche, you know, but just think about those scenarios where they can actually like attach your monster or special summon it. And also the Pinguicula has a second part of the first effect where all of them are unaffected, but this one also says that the activated effects of other monsters with the same type as this card's material, it's also unaffected by them. As for some of the other generic monsters that can be used in the extra deck, there's Exetonite. Be prepared for it. They can easily make it. There's also Baguska. They can play the package of Medimaker and Sargas even without the theory and stuff because it just makes for a 2-material Zeus. It's not bad, you know, like the Zeus 2-cent, like I think that's kind of decent. They also use the Redoer, which is a very important card in the deck. For the most part, it is going to have a trap card as material and it can bounce to the top of your deck. And also, they don't need to detach a monster and a trap like necessarily. So if they want to detach a trap and just bounce something and OTK you, that's something that can happen. So keep that in mind as well. Again, it's very annoying. But we are going to talk about small out to Redoer when we get to the cards that are good against the deck. So as the first one, since we were talking about Redoer, Book of Eclipse is actually kind of underrated, I think, because if you use it in the draw phase, you also prevent the Redoer effect from taking your card. So they can't hit like a spell card for draw. Not giving them an additional material is always great. So I don't think Eclipse is bad, actually. Then there's Nibiru. So also in their deck, Nibiru is searchable off of Gallant Granite. So think about that as well when you're playing, if they searched it or maybe they have it, because for the most part, they are going to be maining it. Nibiru is not bad against them, but they can play around it because Rafflesia can be the 5th summon. Then also evenly, like we said before, it's really good, but if they keep Sara, they get additional pluses and they can have the Holotea in the graveyard and all of that, but we discussed that already. So I still think evenly is not bad at all because they need to have some kind of board presence if they want to beat you going first. So yeah, I would say evenly is a nice choice. Then we have Ash. Ash on Sara is huge for the summon from the main deck because you are stopping a lot of their plays, and it's also not bad against Parallel Exceed. Then there's the destruction cards like Harpies, Lightning Storm. They're not bad, especially if you decide to main Harpies, for example. It's smart because they're not going to go for the protection for the Arachnokampa going first game 1, probably. So you know that if you do something like Harpies, you are going to get full value off of it probably. And post side, you can run into Judgment and the protection and all of that. But it does work together with Tasking. I think Tasking is not bad at all because you can use it with Harpies, with evenly, all of that, and just have additional copies of those cards. Cosmic Cyclone, not bad at all because you are completely going around the protection. And we talked about Impermanence. It's not great. Just side it out. Don't use it. They're unaffected anyway, and you're just triggering Sara. So at that point, you can use Valor if you want. However, I don't know how many people are actually playing Valor in their deck right now. So also cards like Dark Hole and Raigeki are useful against them. It might not be the most obvious thing to go for when you're going up against a trap deck, but it's just they have a lot of monster board presence. Like they have a bunch of monsters on the board. If they go for Redoer, they can also summon Rafflesia. They have the Sara like pretty much all the time. They're summoning monsters during your turn. So cards like Dark Hole and Raigeki I think are quite useful. So you want to go for cards like Lightning Storm is not bad either, calling monsters and playing around the protection. So there's a couple other ideas. And with that, I think we are done. I think we covered everything. There's probably more things to talk about, but I did try my best to cover as much as I could. So hopefully this video was helpful. Let me know if it was, and let me know if there's anything else that you would like to talk about when it comes to Traptrix, and how to beat them, how to go up against them, what to even do, and be aware of when you're playing against them. So yeah, if you like this video, please like it, sub to the channel, check out all the social media, and I'll see you guys in the next video.